All right, let's get right into it. When we think about parasites, our minds usually jump to tropical places, right? Something that feels, well, far away. But what if I told you there's a hidden threat? A family of worms that's quietly on the move, expanding its territory with the help of an accomplice we all know. Today, we're taking a close look at Dirofilaria. And that really brings us to the core question for this whole explainer. What actually happens when a parasite that loves the heat starts popping up in places it's never been seen before? I mean, this is a story about climate change, about how much we travel, and about a super complex life cycle finding brand new homes. So take a look at this. What I find fascinating here is how clearly it just maps out the invasion. Down in southern Europe, you can see Dirofilaria is hyperendemic. I mean, it's just a known part of the ecosystem there. But now, look north. In Central Europe, it's emerging. And then way up in Northern Europe, we're seeing something really significant. It used to be that cases were just imported, from travel. But now, we're seeing locally transmitted cases. The scientific term is autothoctonous, which basically means the parasite is spreading right there, on its own. This is no longer just a vacation problem. The entire front line is shifting. Okay, so let's get formally introduced to the culprits here. The name Dirofilaria, well, it's Latin for evil thread. And honestly, once you see what they look like, it's a pretty perfect description. We're going to be focusing on two main species, Dirofilaria immitis and Dirofilaria repens. So first things first, what exactly are we talking about here? These are what we call metazoan endoparasites, and that's a really key distinction. See, we're not dealing with some single-celled protozoa like Giardia. No way. We are talking about complex, multicellular animals. They have tissues, organs, even digestive tracts, and they spend their entire adult lives living inside another animal's body. Wild, right? And this table here does a great job of showing you exactly where they fit in the animal kingdom. They're nematodes. You might know them as roundworms, and they belong to the same family as other filarial worms, like the ones that cause river blindness. That family connection is a big clue. Right? It hints that they're all going to have these similarly complex and kind of sneaky life cycles. Okay, just to give you a sense of scale here, because this is pretty mind-blowing, an adult female Dirofilaria immitis, that's the heartworm, can get to be over 30 centimeters long. That's basically the length of a standard ruler. Its cousin, Dirofilaria repens, the one that lives in the skin, is a bit smaller, but it still gets up to 17 centimeters. So yeah, we are definitely not talking about microscopic threats here. These are big, substantial animals living inside a host. So the big question is, how on earth do these long worms get from one animal to another? Well, they've got a critical partner in crime, the mosquito. Seriously, without this little vector, the parasite's life cycle would just stop, dead in its tracks. It's completely dependent on it. This diagram here really lays out the whole journey beautifully. It's a classic two-host system. You can see right here the parasite absolutely has to have both the mammal host, usually a dog or another carnivore, that's the definitive host, and the mosquito, which is the intermediate host. It needs both of them to finish its development and to spread. One without the other, and the cycle is broken. Okay, let's break this little dance down. Step 1, a mosquito bites an infected dog and sucks up these tiny baby worms called microfilaria right from the blood. Step 2, inside the mosquito, those little larvae develop and molt until they reach the infective L3 stage. And this part is key. It requires warm temperatures to happen. That's the climate change connection. Then, step 3, that infected mosquito goes and bites a new host, and it basically spits the infective larvae into the bite wound. From there, those larvae go on a journey, migrating through the body and growing into those huge adult worms we were just talking about. Now see, dogs are the natural, perfect hosts for these worms. But what happens when that same infected mosquito bites one of us? Well, humans are what's called accidental or dead-end hosts. The worms get inside us for sure, but then they get completely lost. They don't know where to go. And where they end up getting stuck is what determines the kind of trouble they cause. And here's the crucial split between the two. The Dirofilaria immitis larvae, they try to follow their normal path to the heart, but in a human body, they just can't make it. They usually get stuck in the small blood vessels of the lungs. Our immune system finds them, attacks, and builds a wall around them, forming these little nodules. Dirofilaria repens, on the other hand, is already pre-programmed for life in the tissues, so it just stays put, right under the skin, where it creates these weird, mobile, and sometimes painful lumps. And right here, you can see exactly what happens when Dirofilaria immitis gets lost in the lung.
The little worm dies inside a tiny blood vessel, and the inflammation that follows creates this thing called a granuloma. Now, the scary part is, on a chest x-ray, this shows up as a perfectly round shadow called a coin lesion. And as you can imagine, that looks alarmingly like a tumor, which means it often leads to some pretty invasive procedures to make sure it's not cancer.
And this diagram shows us the other side of the coin, the path of Dirofilaria repens. It forms a nodule right under the skin. Or in some really unsettling cases, it can end up in the white of your eye. Now, while it's generally not as dangerous as a lung lesion, I think we can all agree that the experience of finding a wandering worm under your own skin is, well, it's the stuff of nightmares. So, okay, given these two very different threats, how do we actually fight back? Well, the counterattack is basically a three-pronged approach. It's about clever diagnostics, targeted treatments, and this is the most important part, really, really robust prevention. Right, so diagnosing these infections is totally different depending on the situation. In humans, like we just saw, Dirofilaria immitis is usually found completely by accident on a chest x-ray, and for Dirofilaria repens, the diagnosis often comes after a doctor surgically removes one of those weird lumps and sends it for a biopsy. But in the veterinary world, they've got much more direct tools, things like super common antigen tests for heartworm, or just looking under a microscope for the microfilaria in a blood sample. And treatment, that's another thing that really depends on where you are in the world. In places where heartworm is common, vets are experts at using these really powerful drugs, adulticides like melarsoline, to kill the adult worms in a dog. But then you take a country like the Netherlands, where the disease is almost always just imported from somewhere else. Well, they don't even routinely stock that drug. They have to specially order it. The focus there shifts completely to prevention and just managing the odd case that comes through the door. And all of this really brings us to what is, without a doubt, the single most important takeaway from this whole thing. For both the heartworm and the skinworm, whether we're talking about our pets or ourselves, the absolute best strategy is just prevention. Period. Stopping the infection before it even has a chance to start. So what does prevention look like? Well, it really boils down to two main things. First, for our pets, it's all about those monthly preventative medications. They work by killing the larval stages of the worm before they can grow into dangerous adults. And this is non-negotiable, absolutely critical if you're traveling with your pet to an area where this parasite is common. And the second part, vector control. That just means reducing mosquito populations and using repellents to stop them from biting in the first place. So when we look to the future, the story of Dirofilaria is really a perfect case study of how the entire parasite landscape is evolving. The challenges that we're going to face tomorrow are literally being shaped by the climate and our travel patterns today. In this quote on the screen just sums it all up perfectly. We can't tackle a problem like this from just one angle. It's impossible. It demands that veterinarians, public health officials, and scientists all work together. It's this idea called One Health, which recognizes that the health of animals, the health of humans, and the health of our environment are all deeply, fundamentally interconnected. Just so you know, we put together all the information for this explainer using a Gemini deep search. If you're curious and you want to dive even deeper into the actual research papers yourself, we've got you covered. You can find a detailed list of all our sources in the Notebook LM document that's linked down in the description. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. We know Dirofilaria is on the move now, but as our world keeps getting warmer and insects keep expanding their territory, what unseen threat is coming next? What's on the horizon? Hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive and found it useful, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the channel for more explainers just like this one. We would genuinely love to hear your thoughts and any questions you might have, so please jump into the comments section and leave your feedback. Thanks so much for watching.